All right, we're back online and we have this essay level 168. So when I talk to a startup that's been operating for more than 8 or 9 months, the first thing I want to know is almost always the same. Assuming their expenses remain constant, their revenue growth is what it has been over the last several months. Do they make it to profitability on the money they have left? Or, to put it more dramatically, by default, do they live or die? The starting thing is how often the founders themselves don't know. Half of the founders I talk to don't know whether they're default alive or default dead. If you're among that number, Trevor Blackwell has made a handy calculator to you can use to find out. The reason I want to know first whether a startup is default alive or default dead is that the rest of the conversation depends on that answer. If the company is default alive, we can talk about the ambitious new things they could do. If it's default dead, we probably need to talk about how to save it. We know the current trajectory ends badly. How can they get off that trajectory? When do we when do so few founders know whether they're default alive or default dead? Mainly I think because they are not used to asking that. It's not a question that makes sense to ask early on any more than it makes sense to ask a 3-year-old how he plans to support himself. But as the company grows older, the question switches from meaningless to critical. The kind of switch often takes people by surprise. I propose the following solution. Instead of starting to ask too late whether you're default alive or dead, asking too early. Start asking too early. It's hard to say precisely when the question switches polarity, but it's probably not dangerous to start worrying too early that you're default dead, whereas it's very dangerous to start worrying too late. Hmm. So what does it mean by being default dead or whatever that fucking thing is? Hmm. By
ఆగు, 2 ప్లేట్లు తింటే అమ్మ ఏమనుకుంటుంది? 3 ప్లేట్లు తెచ్చినావంటగా. 3 ప్లేట్లు తెస్తే మరి ఇంకో ప్లేట్ ఏది? ఒక ప్లేట్ అమ్మ తిన్నది, ఇంకొక ప్లేట్ నువ్వు తిన్నావు, ఇంకో ప్లేట్ ఏది? అట్లా తినొద్దు కదా. నీకు
oh, come on, dude. All right. ఉండు, నేను తీయను. నేను పనిలో ఉన్నా, నన్ను ఇబ్బంది పెట్టద్దు. హేయ్, లైవ్ ఇది, పో తోబే. I'm done with this. Freaking hell. Alright, let's continue. The reason I want to know whether the startup is default alive or default dead is that the rest of the conversation depends on that answer. Okay, we have done it already. The purpose of following solution. I propose the following solution instead of starting to ask too late whether you're default alive or default dead. Start asking too early. It's hard to say precisely when the question switches polarity, but it's probably not that dangerous to start worrying too early that you're default dead, whereas it's dangerous to start worrying too late. The reason is the phenomenon I wrote about earlier, the fatal pinch. The fatal pinch is default dead plus slow growth plus not enough time to fix it. And the way founders end up in it is by not realizing that's where they're headed. There is another reason founders don't ask themselves whether they are default dead or alive. They assume it will be easy to raise money. But the assumption is often false. The worse still, the more you depend on it, the falser it becomes. Maybe it will help you to separate facts from hopes. Instead of thinking about the future in a vague optimism, explicitly separate the components. Say we are default dead, but we are counting on the investors to save us. Okay. It will be safe to be default dead if you could count on investors saving you. As a rule, their interest is function of the growth. If you have a steep revenue growth, say over 5x a year, you can start to count on investors being interested even if it's not profitable. But investors are so fickle that you can never do more than start to count on them. Sometimes something about your business will spook investors even if the growth is great. So, no matter how good your growth is, you can never safely treat fundraising as more than a plan A. You should always have plan B as well. You should know precisely what you'll need to do to survive if you can't raise money, and precisely when you'll have to switch to plan B if plan A isn't working. In any case, growing fast versus operating cheaply is far from sharp dichotomy many founders assume to be. In practice, there is a surprising little connection between how much a startup spends and how fast it grows. When a startup grows fast, usually it's usually because the product hits a nerve. In the sense of hitting some big need straight on, when a startup spends a lot, it's usually because the product is expensive to develop or sell, or simply because they are wasteful. If you're paying attention, you will be able to ask this point not just how to avoid the fatal pinch, but to avoid being default dead. That one is easy. Don't hire too fast. Hiring too fast is by far the biggest killer of startups that raise money. Founders tell themselves they need to hire in order to grow, but most err on the side of overestimating this need rather than underestimating it. Why? Partly because there is so much work to do. Naive founders think that if we can hire enough people, it will all get done. Partly because successful startups have a lot of employees, so it seems like that's what one does in order to be successful. In fact, the large staffs of successful startups are probably more the effect of growth than cause. Partly because when founders are slow growth, they don't want to face what is usually the reason product is not appealing enough. Mm. Yeah, it's so good. Too close? I don't know. Begging you. Oh my god, what am I doing? Look at me. E. E. I have no idea, baby, 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 baby. What the fuck am I doing here? I'm supposed to read this. What the fuck, Hanu? Plus, founders who have just raised money are often encouraged to overhire by the VCs who founded them. Kill or cure strategies are optimal for VCs because they are protected by the portfolio effect. VCs want to blow you up in one sense, the other phrase or the other. One sense of the phrase or the other. But as a founder, your incentives are different. You want above all to survive. My gosh. That's weird. show this. Okay. That's how it works. Okay, I should pause it, probably. I don't know. I mean, I've been gotten interrupted